you watch him on film, and I mean, he just kind of fits the mantra of what Florida State wants, a hustling defender, someone who, if he's out of position on a play, he's still hustling to try and get there for a tackle. You can see it a couple times, on film. The offense goes to one side of the field and the quarterback or running back gets 10, 15 yards upfield, and you've got Holmes coming in from the backside. I mean, kind of reminded me a little bit of some of that early film we watched of Jared Verse before he ended up transferring to Florida State. Just that hustle to chase down ball carriers, and at that 6'6", 250-pound size, I mean, extremely impressive. So, I mean, there's some stuff for him to continue improving on, but I mean, he's bringing a very solid base into Florida State, and I think the coaching staff is going to really like watching this one develop over the next couple of years.
Hey guys, it's Terrence Nan. You're listening to Hear the Spirit, presented by No Game Day. Go Noles.
Hey, what's up? This is Peter Ward, a.k.a. P-Dub, in the house. So we're listening to Hear the Spirit, presented by No Game Day. Go Live, go Noles.
Hi, this is Charlie Ward, and you're listening to Hear the Spirit, go Noles.
This is Terrell Buckley. You're listening to Hear the Spirit, presented by No Game Day. No Bloody.
But perhaps better known as the greatest corner to ever step on a football field, Deion Primetime Sanders.
Great Deion Sanders, my brother. What's going on, man? I could wake up to that greeting every day, man. That was awesome.
Hello, Noles fans. This is former Seminole Derek Brooks, and you're listening to Hear the Spirit, presented to you by No Game Day.
James Wilder Jr. What's going on, James?
Thanks for having me on. FSOD, Florida State or Die, and go Noles.
William Bar None Floyd.
Gentlemen, what's up?
What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Hear the Spirit, presented to you by NoleGaming.com. We're here on a live, wonderful Wednesday evening, post July 4th activities, and also Florida State in a really, really good groove right now to begin July on the recruiting trail for Mike Norvell and the Florida State football staff. We're going to jump into a whole ton of recruiting, as we should. We have some recaps of some commitments to go through, and then also we're going to talk some recruiting going into the rest of July and maybe some targets to keep an eye out for. A lot of decision dates are being put in place, along with a talented offensive tackle that Florida State is really pushing hard to get. He just dropped his top 3. And then we're going to talk some Jayden Daniels, LSU's quarterback. He talked Florida State's the season opener against FSU. He had a few comments there about that. Brian Courtney, Florida State's tight end, moving over to the linebacker position. So we're going to be giving our thoughts on that. And then we got some basketball too. Baba Miller, young FSU star player, returning this upcoming season, but over there getting a gold medal for Team USA for U19s. So nice.
Not USA.
What
not
was it?
USA. Spain.
Oh, shit. Not USA. It was not USA. Team Spain. But with me this evening is Austin Veazey down below, our lead basketball writer, as he kind of just showed me practically. And then Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief at NoleGaming.com. How are we feeling? Got some commits. Starting off a little bit better than June.
Yeah, no commits in the month of June, and now we're sitting here on the evening of July 5th. Florida State has already landed 4 verbal commitments so far. I came on the podcast last week and said I expected at least 5 commits this month. We're already almost there. We might have to bump that over or under up a little bit. I'm starting to think, maybe we set the line at 7.5 at this rate, and we'll get into that a little bit later into the show, but I mean, some nice pickups for Florida State over the extended holiday weekend, and now you're sitting over there, at least according to 247 Sports, the number 13 class in the country, with room to continue growing over the next couple of weeks for Florida State.
Before we get started with everything, as always, you can listen to podcasts on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. We're on YouTube right now. If you guys are watching early, hit that like button. It'll make it so it goes to more FSU fans. We got close to like 7,000 views on our last episode just from YouTube alone. So appreciate all of our YouTube community hanging out with us. We're either live or afterward. A lot of y'all have been listening in and tuning in. So appreciate everybody hanging out with us this evening. But yeah, make sure you smack that like button and make sure you subscribe on all the podcast platforms that you listen to. But let's jump into it. We got quite a few to go through. to start off this July, Florida State bringing in 4 commitments. Man, it was a busy last couple of days for you, Dustin, but the content was great. Some of these commitment videos were awesome. Love seeing the reaction from some of these guys, including D.D. Holmes, Dustin. That might be my favorite commit, just solely off of getting the commitment like 1 or 2 minutes before his actual time of saying it. Because as we all know, at least covering Florida State or any kind of outlet covering a college program and having to cover a commitment, usually it doesn't happen until like 15 or 20 minutes later. Everything's getting set up. Got to get the IG live going. Got to get all the video camera angles. But D.D. Holmes picks Florida State over Maryland, South Carolina, and others. A 4-star defensive end. Really liked his size. You were posting some pictures during his visit, Dustin, but really nice build on this player. Thoughts on this commitment coming in for Coach JP, Coach Odell Hagen's Fuller, and getting a guy on the defensive side, which I know a lot of FSU fans were pushing for, definitely on the line side of things.
Yeah, like you said, he didn't waste any time jumping into the boat there. You can tell this was a guy who was ready to go public with his Florida State commitment. And obviously Florida State hosted Holmes during that final weekend of June. So they kind of got the last impression there ahead of his decision. And I mentioned last week on the podcast, I was watching the Instagram live of him going through the photo shoot. And a lot of times you see these guys hop on Instagram and live stream it whenever they're doing the Doak After Dark photo shoot and things like that. And I think his mom was holding the phone and said, Florida State, it looks like it suits you, or it feels like home, or something like that. And I mean, that kind of really ended up paying off in the end. It seems like that official visit made him and his family feel, comfortable for him to come over from the Maryland area now to come play his college career at Florida State. And I mean, this was a big one for FSU. They were still searching for a defensive end pledge to kind of start off this 2024 class. Now they get one in Holmes, who has some room to continue growing, but I mean, comes into Florida State with a 6'6", 250-pound frame. You watch him on film, and I mean, he just kind of fits the mantra of what Florida State wants, a hustling defender, someone who, if he's out of position on a play, he's still hustling to try and get there for a tackle. You can see it a couple times, on film. The offense goes to one side of the field and the quarterback or running back gets 10, 15 yards upfield, and you've got Holmes coming in from the backside. I mean, kind of reminded me a little bit of some of that early film we watched of Jared Verse before he ended up transferring to Florida State. Just that hustle to chase down ball carriers, and at that 6'6", 250-pound size, I mean, extremely impressive. So, I mean, there's some stuff for him to continue improving on, but I mean, he's bringing a very solid base into Florida State, and I think the coaching staff is going to really like watching this one develop over the next couple of years.
Definitely when you can have some kind of small similarities between Jared Verse and how his effort is, Dustin. We saw that right off the bat whenever he arrived. Verse has crazy athleticism, and to have some kind of comparison there with DD is nice. That kid definitely, with what Coach Storms could do with them too in the weight room. And so Florida State still wants to add in, continue to build some young defensive end depth, as Florida State has a few right now on their rosters, incoming freshmen, but still, DD has what you like and can be developed. And Florida State has done a good job of evaluating talent early, and it seems like they've done a good job here, and they did a really good job with the visit, like you said, with mom. If mom's happy, and that's something that Mike Norvell usually does a really good job with, definitely being close with the family members along with mom. I mean, that's kind of where he does the best. It feels like, Dustin, just talking to some of the recruits and probably multiple interviews you've had with them.
Florida State, I mean, they really do a good job on these official visits. I think that's why they were pushing to have so many of these guys come in on that final weekend, because, they're expecting a lot of these guys to make decisions before their senior seasons. That weekend was one of really the last times for college campuses to host prospects before the 2023 season, outside of a small window here at the very end of July. So, I mean, it's paying off for Florida State so far with these 4 commitments. All of these guys were on official visits. 2 of them were on that last weekend, but I mean, all 4 guys ended up committing to FSU over the weekend, dropped by Tallahassee for official visits in June. And I mean, you can just see when FSU gets guys on campus, it helps them stand out compared to the competition. I think the message from Mike Norvell, getting to sit down with their respective coordinator, position coach, that pays off for a lot of guys. And especially when you're talking about someone like D.D. Holmes, who's coming, from a significant distance away to come play at Florida State. I actually believe in this 2024 class, he was the first commitment for Florida State outside of the state of states of Georgia and Florida. Now you've also got one from Alabama and Rydarius Morgan, who we'll talk about in a little bit. So expanding, the foothold a little bit here. But I mean, that's a long way to come from Tallahassee, and says a lot that he chose the Seminoles over Maryland and South Carolina, Rutgers as well.
Mm-hmm. You were mentioning earlier, Dustin, about, Florida State getting these players in and having really successful official visits, but to really have a full successful one, you want to be able to land those commitments, like just, land them earlier than later. And I think that's something that this staff stresses a tiny bit. I mean, they're more focused on building a relationship, and they'll go the long run. We've seen them be able to do that. And even whenever it goes into the transfer portal, they try to keep those relationships tight. But for it to kind of be in this point now where Florida State's able to grab some guys after having these really nice visits with them is huge. So that's something that I think, we'll continue to watch and monitor as Florida State does this with some really nice talent that they need in some of these areas. Then we need to jump to another one here, a guy that I really like, a talented defensive back, and definitely whenever you're able to pick a player away from Miami, Florida State, FSU Twitter, deeply happy about that as the trolling continues. But Florida State and Coach Surtain in his first year with the Seminoles, he lands Ricky Knight, a defensive back, 4-star per 247 Sports, 6 foot 168 from West Palm Beach, Florida, from down south and the Mario Cristobal area, Dustin. And this is kind of a trend right now for what Florida State and the Mike Norvell staff is able to do. But kind of, what were your thoughts on, the interview they had with him? This is a guy that likes to talk. He's not shy whatsoever. We're going to try to work on trying to get some of these recruits on here and do some interviews. And I think Ricky would be a great one to do it with, definitely to talk about Coach Surtain and what he's bringing to the table for Florida State's offensive back room. But thoughts on Ricky, what you were hearing from him after his visit? He ends up picking Florida State and further.
Yeah, well, first off, I think it's just worth mentioning Florida State was the first school to actually offer Ricky Knight a scholarship back in January, and that's kind of something that stuck with him ever since, as he's really developed into a national recruit and gained interest from Power 5 schools across the country. Miami actually got the last visit in this recruitment, but it seemed like his time in Tallahassee the weekend prior on his official visit was what sold him in this decision to commit to Florida State. Just from my point of view, the 3 or 4 visits he's been on throughout the year, every time he comes out of it seems like him and his family are extremely impressed. And, they're always gushing about what Florida State, the coaching staff, has to offer. He's built a really good relationship with Mike Norvell, as well as Coach Surtain throughout this process. And like you mentioned, this is the first pickup for Coach Surtain on the recruiting trail. And, I think it's a big one. I think Ricky's a little bit underrated by some recruiting services. He's just got some of those traits that you can't really stack up into a number. I mean, this is a guy who, in my opinion, extremely competitive, a very gritty defender, very physical, loves to come up at the line of scrimmage. In his highlights, you can see a lot of the times he's coming up, making tackles on, receivers, catching bubble screens at line of scrimmage, or coming up and taking out a running back right there at the line of scrimmage. I mean, this is a physical cornerback, someone who's probably going to slot in, I would say, as a nickel at Florida State or an outside cornerback at the next level. But I mean, someone who, like D.D. Holmes, he's just kind of got those traits that, when you're thinking about the kind of team that Mike Norvell, the kind of defense that Adam Fuller wants to build, getting these guys who are, they're pests to play against. And I mean, it's just tough to kind of scheme against them around the field. And like I said, you just can't really bubble all those traits down to a number at some point. You can't put a star on someone's hustle or on their mindset. And I really think Ricky Knight has it. He's someone that I've really liked ever since FSU joined his recruitment in January.
Yeah, I think just like some kind of comparison here, just a tiny bit, just with the, I don't know, like the energy he's bringing, the effort that he brings, kind of like a Greedy Vance, in my opinion. Greedy's kind of all over the place and knows where to be, but he'll come down and do what he needs to do. I think what Florida State's kind of looking for, too, is a replacement for what Jamie Robinson brought, at least to the safety position. I think that's something that Florida State always likes to have back there, a really smart player, and isn't afraid to come down at times. And so, just depending, Ricky Knight, he's got the capabilities of a lot of different ways he could be used on a defense. That's just how he is. So interested to see what Adam Fuller and Coach Surtain want to do with him. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn quite a bit this upcoming season with what Coach Surtain likes back there, right? Because we haven't been able to see that on this level yet, definitely for Florida State, and what kind of, he's got talent now, Coach Surtain does, but I'm really interested to see, we're starting to pick out these different types that he likes and his backfield on defense.
And also, just sticking with Ricky Knight, I also really like his just his off the field approach. You talk to some of these recruits, and of course these guys are 16, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. They're just getting started in their lives, and some of them, they don't have a lot to say. But Ricky Knight is someone who is able to really form an opinion on things, offer his perspective. I thought it was really interesting to hear him talk about how he connected with the players on his official visit. That was another thing that I think played in Florida State's favor here. Really got along with some of the other defensive backs on the team. And, Florida State, they hold this thing called a player panel during the official visit, where basically the visitors will all get to sit down with some players, and it'll basically be like a Q&A just to kind of see what it's like at Florida State, what the coaches are like, things like that. And, I was just impressed with Ricky talking about, how he just went straight into that and was asking players about things about Florida State, just wasn't shy about it at all. Really love that approach.
Yep. I like that too. Outgoing guys, man. Outgoing. All right. So we got Ricky Knight. So that's 2. We got 2 more to go here. And this time we're going to the donk, baby. That's fueled up. It's ready to go. We talked about this last week a little bit, but giving our credit to Ron Dugans a lot this last year, and what he's been able to do after we gave him, a tough time. It was earned, I guess, at that point in time, but just the way that he's been able to revamp that room, both the transfer portal, bringing in guys that can be immediate impactful players, to now on the recruiting trail, is super impressive. But Florida State, Ron Dugans, the donk, they land a really talented playmaking wide receiver over Ohio State with Elijah Moore. Dustin, it was the same with D.D. Holmes. You're posting some pictures. You liked what you heard from him after his visit as well. But Florida State did a phenomenal job in this recruitment, but specifically probably this last visit that they had with him. It just seems like whenever you're able to take a wide receiver, definitely have that talent, magnitude, the range that he has. If you guys haven't yet, go check out some of his film. But it's what fits Florida State's offense as being a playmaker at the wide receiver position. And Florida State did exactly what they needed in grabbing Elijah over Ohio State, which, as everybody knows, is a top-tier program in the wide receiver room, putting guys into the NFL. But, yeah, Elijah Moore, a Seminole.
That's exactly how I was going to start it off. Anytime you're able to beat out Ohio State for a wide receiver, especially one that's from the Northeast and Maryland area, that's kind of Ohio State territory, if you think about it, being in the Big Ten and all. It's a huge one for Florida State. Like you said, the Buckeyes have put a lot of receivers in the NFL as of late. Brian Hartline, one of the top position coaches in all of college football, has gotten a lot of praise over the past couple of years. So for Florida State to win out on this one, a player that Ohio State wanted in Elijah Moore, I think it's absolutely huge. Like you said, I think you kind of dubbed it perfectly, a 6'4" playmaker coming to Tallahassee. And he's not just a guy who's a red zone threat. He's someone that can really impact the game all over the field. And I'll say it for a third time, someone that just fits what Florida State wants to do, because you're bringing in a 6'4" wide receiver. This is a guy who's already extremely physical at the point of attack as a wide receiver, as a blocker. And then you look at his film, the second clip on his highlight tape is him coming down on special teams on kickoff coverage and laying a lick on a kick returner. That's what Florida State's looking for. Yeah. Someone that can play on, both sides of the football. Guys that can play offense, guys that can contribute on multiple levels of special teams. That's what you're going to get in Elijah Moore. If he doesn't make an impact on offense out of the gate, he's going to be someone on one of those special teams units from the first day that he gets to Tallahassee. Loads of potential here. You look at some of his footwork. I think it's extremely impressive. He's able to create some space on smaller defensive backs. Does play in a little bit of weaker competition, but at the same time, when you're just looking at him physically and what he's able to do on the football field for a guy who's 6'4", 190 to 200 pounds already entering his senior season of high school, it's extremely impressive. He's got a really good blend of athleticism. I think his body control for being 6'4" is crazy. I mean, you can pull it up on some of the highlights, some of the catches that he's able to pull off and just tight space. And he's also someone that goes after the football in the air. He's not waiting for the ball to arrive to him. He's going up to snag it. You can see some nice one-handed grabs on there on Elijah Moore's highlight tape. In my opinion, I mean, this might be the best receiver that Florida State has landed so far in this 2024 class. Absolute boatloads of potential. And I mean, I would compare him a little bit to Johnny Wilson or Kentron, but if you think about those guys coming into college from the high school level, I think he might be a little bit ahead of where they were at that respective time.
I was going to say too, I know a lot of comments in here. I mean, it just shocks me, what Florida State's been able to do with this wide receiver room. It's been so long since we've seen a Seminole get drafted, and we're going to see that this upcoming draft in the 2024 class, starting off with Johnny Wilson, but just looking at the young talent that's on this squad, man. I mean, Dustin, we were watching spring. We watched on Vondravius Jacobs look like he'd been here for 2 years. I mean, that's just pure evaluation, and it just fits the mold of this offense well. And you already know what you've got with your other wide receivers too, as long as Hakeem Williams get into a groove as well. We saw that in the spring game a little bit, just kind of what he brings to your offense, definitely in the red zone. It's really special. I know there's a question in here too from Alan on Facebook asking, great get, but how many wide receivers are they going to have on this roster? It's starting to look like Coach Atkins' room with the offensive linemen, man, with pure talent, playmaking abilities.
I think they're sitting in a good spot right now. Elijah Moore is the 5th blue chip wide receiver to commit to Florida State so far in this 2024 class. There have been some question marks surrounding TJ Abrams, who was in Tallahassee that final weekend of June as well for his official visit, and also LaWayne McCoy. It seems like both of those guys are still looking around a little bit. If I had to make a prediction, I would think that one of the two, maybe even both of them, don't eventually end up in this signing class for Florida State. FSU obviously still involved with Jeremiah Smith, who we talked about last weekend, Joshua Trader as well. And then Cameron Coleman, who actually committed to Texas A&M over the weekend on July 4th. But I think Florida State, they're still going to push to try and get an official visit in the fall. So I think you've got your floor of this receiver class really set up with these 5 guys that you've committed. And now you're going to take a swing at a big fish, Smith, Trader, Coleman, one of those guys to close out the class. That's basically like landing your Hakeem Williams from last year. We'll see what Florida State's able to do there. But at the same time, if you're not able to land one of those 3 guys, I think what you do have in these 5 blue chip guys, and assuming you sign at least 4 of them, that's going to be a win for Florida State moving into the future.
This is ridiculous. Look at this kid, man. The range on him is just stupid. This angle, right when they flip it over here. What the
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's true. His Instagram says Overtime Elite Hall of Fame. So I don't know if that's a thing or not, but regardless, he did his commitment live on the Overtime channel. I mean, that's pretty cool.
He might be, man, with these highlight catches, dude. I mean, it makes for a quarterback a little bit of an easier job if you can just throw this up and just let him bring it down with one-handed grabs. I mean, it's just yeah. Dugan, I mean, it's not going to work at practice, Dustin. We're there, and Mike Norvell does not like one-handed grabs whatsoever, and so doesn't Coach Dugans. But there's sometimes some situations where, you got to come down with it. Johnny Wilson, he did that against Oklahoma and the Cheez-It Bowl and had a nice gain there for Florida State. So, sometimes it has to be done, but, 2 hands on the ball. But this kid is just talented. I mean, that's all you can say. Playmaker. Florida State gets a really good one here. and excited, once he signs and everything, getting him to Tallahassee. It's going to be fun. It's just like one of those fun players you get to watch during practice. Like when we saw Vondravius Jacobs, you just know there was a really high chance that Vondravius Jacobs, no matter what the situation was, the DB's in really good coverage, that kid is going to go and try to grab it no matter what, whatever position he's in. And that's kind of what I see with Elijah Moore. He's just got more, I think, range with him.
Anytime you can get a 6'4" athlete like this on your team, I mean, you got to pull the trigger. If it doesn't work out for Elijah Moore at wide receiver, he might have a future at tight end. He might have a future on the other side of the ball. It's really just you're looking at those traits that he has. He has all the makings of what could potentially be a really good receiver for Florida State. I think we're just going to have to see how it works out. Also, like I mentioned before, he was here during that last weekend of his official visit. I think for this one for Florida State, it was really the relationships with Elijah Moore. He said that Mike Norvell and Ron Dugans had both been recruiting him since he was in 8th grade. So, I mean, we're talking about since really Mike Norvell got here to Tallahassee that they'd begun to establish that relationship with Elijah Moore. And I was just impressed with kind of his mindset, just talking about what it would be like if he came to Florida State. And he was just talking about all the work that he knew that they would have to do and, that the team would have to commit to it too, basically. So, I mean, one of those guys that's coming in, if it's staying that he sticks with Florida State and signs them in December, that's going to come in with that mindset that you really want. And I think you've seen it from some of these guys in this 2023 true freshman class that are already in Tallahassee. You mentioned Jacobs and Williams, but I mean, some other guys across the other side of the ball as well already making impacts at Florida State. We saw it from that 2022 class. So Florida State doing a really good job of identifying guys that aren't just productive athletes, but they're bringing in that right mindset, that hard work, quote unquote, lunch pail mentality to come into Tallahassee and just get going out of the gate.
Did you already, before this, Dustin, I'm sorry if I missed, I was doing some stuff with the Instagram post, but did you mention what Brian Hartline, Ohio State's wide receiver coach, said about, the potential of what Elijah Moore could bring to offense? I think I saw, I forget, I wish I could credit which outlet posted it, but I think I saw it in our Discord of Brian Hartline, Ohio State's wide receiver coach. Obviously, what we talked about him earlier, a lot of talent that he's sent off to the NFL. He projected that Elijah Moore could be a Marvin Harrison Jr. or better type, like a player, which is really, really says something. Good God, it does. And then he also, I think Elijah was also talking about, Florida State side, what they were telling him and saying, you could be our next Johnny Wilson. So I just thought that was a pretty strong quote there from Brian Hartline, who is a very, very talented coach at what he does in that wide receiver room. Let's jump into the last one here. I like this. I like talking commits. It's time. But here, Florida State lands 3-star defensive back, right? Darius Morgan. He commits to Florida State over Miami and Auburn. Another one going over Miami, man. Another one. But what are FSU fans getting out of Darius specifically, Dustin, do you think, and Coach Surtain on that defensive side and the defensive backfield?
Yeah, this is one, coming in, Coach Surtain's second commitment of the weekend. Like you said, we are starting to see a type with Coach Surtain coming after these competitive, hard-hitting defensive backs. Morgan, someone who, can really play all over that defensive backfield. In my opinion, I think he's going to end up playing safety at Florida State. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Jamie Robinson, someone that's maybe doesn't have the elite size for the position, doesn't have necessarily the elite athleticism for the position, but makes up with it with his physicality on the field, being in the right spots, and just having genuine football instincts and IQ. I think that's a lot of what you see out of Darius Morgan, someone that trusts his eyes a lot. That's the best way I can say it. He trusts his eyes on plays, doesn't let himself get caught out of position. And that's a big part of his game, being in the right position. But then you also see the hustle. Like I mentioned about D.D. Holmes earlier, he'll get caught behind a play and then he's hustling down the field. One of them coming in for a forced fumble. And, something that Florida State likes as well on the highlight tape, multiple special teams units. He's coming down on kickoff coverage, on punt coverage. So, this is someone who you're going to be able to play in the defensive backfield and on special teams, which is obviously a trait that Florida State values a lot. Been putting a very big emphasis on that side of the football ever since Mike Norvell arrived in Tallahassee. And, we saw it start to pay off last year. I think it's only going to become, a greater focus for Florida State moving forward because, that can win you a football game. It happened in the second game of the season for Florida State. So, Ryderus Morgan, I think it's gonna end up being a good take for Florida State, especially with some of the other safeties and other defensive backs that FSU is involved with at this time. Anytime you can win one out over Miami and also in-state Auburn, I don't think Miami fans are kind of complaining about it on Twitter. You're seeing some saying, "Oh, well, he wasn't a take." Well, he was just at Miami the final weekend of June for an official visit. So, to me, that sounds like a take. And he's also from the state of Alabama, so pulling this one over Auburn, we'll see if Florida State can keep it all the way through December in that early signing period. But, a good one. And he's also from the same high school as Cam Coleman. So I mentioned Coleman earlier, committed to Texas A&M, but you get his high school teammate in the fold. Florida State still trying to get him on campus for an official visit. We talked to him at the elite camp back in June. It seems like maybe that Florida State Miami weekend in November might be a target for Coleman to come back to Tallahassee for an official visit. I think having his teammate, it's not going to push anything over the top, but it can only help in Florida State's message moving forward in that recruitment. So bringing in Morgan, really a benefit to FSU's recruiting class in more ways than one.
Right now on 247 Sports, the overall rankings for Florida State, they now sit at number 16. They're right below Clemson at 15. Wait, no, that's the wrong one. My bad.
13.
2024, number 13, and right below Tennessee and Clemson up there at 11. So doing a good job. They're climbing a little bit. And I think, too, from what we'll talk the rest of recruiting here in just a second after we go over Jonathan Daniels, but seems like they're going to have a nice late fireworks to July with some expectations we have. So, yeah, nice get there. Definitely the smarts. That's like I was just talking about earlier. Florida State is trying to look for someone that Jamie Robinson brought to that defense for 2 years. And a lot of that was smarts and just understanding.
Physicality as well.
Yeah, reliable, and that's something Jamie brought to that defense and held down a lot of things this last season and saved some touchdowns. So, a good commit there. I think Florida State sees some talent in right areas. Let's jump into a big-time target that continues to visit Florida State, and that's Jonathan Daniels, a really talented offensive tackle, 4-star. He just dropped his top 3, which I know he put out a teaser the other day saying big decision to make, but it's the usual. All right, here we go. We're going to start dropping some colleges and end up being a top 3, but it's Florida State, Miami, as we were just talking about, and Auburn. Where do you think Florida State is in this recruitment? It seems like they've built a really strong relationship being close by.
Who did you say were the schools?
Georgia, FSU, and I put in here.
Who'd you put?
I put in here Kentucky.
Oh, okay. I thought you said Auburn. For some reason, I heard Auburn.
No.
I don't know.
No.
Well, that's my bad then.
And maybe I did. I had Ryderus Morgan up there, but he was picking over Auburn. But yeah, Florida State, Georgia, and Kentucky. Where do you think Florida State is? I feel like they've built a really good relationship here, but they're kind of just wanting this to get done with and get his commitment.
I think this is really just Jonathan Daniels building some anticipation leading up to his announcement, obviously scheduled to now make that commitment on July 15th between, like you said, Florida State, Kentucky, and Georgia. FSU had him on campus that final weekend of June, so they got the last impression ahead of this commitment. FSU has made him a priority since day one during this recruiting process. Alex Atkins and Mike Norvell really involved here with this one, and you also saw Daniels hanging out with some of the commits, notably Luke Kromenhoek, during that official visit during June. Kromenhoek noted Daniels one of the guys that he's trying to get him to join in this 2024 class. So I think Florida State, they're kind of really doing the right things from all angles here. Kentucky and Georgia both also had Daniels on campus in June. In my opinion, I think Georgia's kind of scratched out here. They added their 5th offensive line commitment today in the 2024 class. So I don't know if they have the numbers to bring in Daniels at this time. And, I currently have Florida State as the favorite in this recruitment as, we enter the final 10 days of it or so before he makes that announcement. I think FSU, with the in-state ties, being pretty much semi-local to the area over in that Pensacola area, and all that Florida State has put into this recruitment, that they're going to win out for Kentucky for Daniels' services. And this is also one that Florida State just can't afford to lose after Jason Zandamela and ITT Manasi both committed to USC in June. So Florida State's still looking for their first pledge along the offensive line. They've got to land this one in Daniels.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely. And Coach Atkins, you can usually rely on that man and bringing in some talent in, but having that nearby guy and Pensacola should help a little bit. But, I think they've done a good job relationship-wise, and he's just holding some things off, building some excitement, like you said, D-Lou. Might as well shoot. I mean, Dustin, would you have done it in high school? How long would you string it out? Would you be a guy that would commit early and just fall in love with the school and be like, that's it? Or would you hold it on, string it along? Let's say you're a 4-star offensive tackle. Are you stringing this along, or are you calling a day and we're just going to get it over with and be done?
I mean, with how it is now, they just passed the rule. It went into effect a couple of days ago where, as a recruit, you can now take as many official visits as you want, one per school. I think we said it before, I'd be taking one every week until I sign in December. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's Georgia or Idaho, just free trip after free trip.
No joke.
I should have said Florida State in there. I shouldn't have said Georgia or Idaho, but either way.
Georgia and Idaho. Whole 180s from programs there. I mean, just like Los said, Carlos Williams, high caliber, one top in the nation as a recruit in his class. He knew he liked Florida State, but he was going to go around and do his visits and take advantage of it. But I would definitely build some suspense all day long. I would just be building it up and building it up. Also, what do you want to say to the critics? I keep on seeing a Discord, and I'm seeing them in a group chat on Twitter having some small little freakouts here and there on Charles Lester. What would you say to the ones tweaking out a tiny bit? I don't know where it's coming from. It's just kind of at the point where maybe too many good things right now are happening for Florida State, and there's got to be another Travis Hunter 2.0, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's posted some stuff on either Twitter or Instagram lately, like him in the Colorado jersey and stuff like that from the unofficial visit he took earlier this year. But I mean, I kind of see it as the same thing with Daniels, just someone who's trying to build up their announcement, especially Charles Lester, a 5-star prospect, one of the top in the country. And then, you look at these recruiting websites and pretty much everyone has Charles Lester predicted to Florida State. He's visited FSU so many times in his recruitment. I think he's trying to, kind of push people off the trail a little bit. But I mean, my opinion, since I mentioned it, I guess it was last week whenever we got back on here, reconvened for the show, my opinion of Charles Lester to Florida State has only continued to grow stronger. And, if that changes, I'm sure we'll bring it up.
Yeah. I think everything's just fine. Just a little bit of, got to stir the pot a tiny bit. Just make sure if you're an FSU Twitter member, just don't focus so much on what the rivals are telling you. That's really just getting in your head a little too much, in my opinion. So, but yeah, well, that's going to be a fun one. That's going to be at the end of the month that we'll be covering that commitment. So make sure you guys are following us there. Before we jump into
let's make sure we get it right. July 28th. Let's make sure we get it right.
July 28th. We might have to do a live or something for that one. That one would be fun to watch. We might have to do a little live on here and watch his commitment. That would be fun. Big time FSU target wanting to add to the DBU for Coach Surtain. Before we go into the rest of this podcast, we're going to jump into Brian Courtney switching from tight end to linebacker. We're also going to talk Jayden Daniels, talking FSU, and Bob Miller. But before I jump you into some recruiting stuff, a little roundup here to summarize everything, D-Lou, make sure you guys hit that like button. I think we're already over like 50-something likes on here. So appreciate it. Helps us bring in some more FSU fans. So if you're on YouTube right now, I think we got close to 100 on here. So if you just hit that like button, don't ask for much more. It's really, really deeply appreciated. So thanks, guys. Dustin, just to summarize and kind of finish off our recruiting side of things this evening, as we just went through 4 commits and also a big time target dropping his top 3. What do we need to keep an eye out for to go into the next bit of July. There's got to be some stuff popping, maybe some targets that we need to keep an eye out for. I know there's a few commitment dates being dropped.
We mentioned Lester. That one's going to be on July 28th. Also, we mentioned Jayden Daniels. That one Saturday, July 15th. And actually, it looks like July 15th could be the next big day for Florida State on the recruiting trail, along with Jayden Daniels. You also had a pair of local prospects, 4-star running back Mekhi Danzy and 3-star safety Ashton Hampton, both from Tallahassee, that play locally at Florida High, the state championship runner-ups from a season ago. They both announced that they'll be committing on July 15th as well. I personally think Florida State, the far and away favorite to land Danzy's commitment at this time. He's really the program's top target right now as the second fiddle to kind of add along Cam Davis in that class. The two fit in very well together. Even worked out together actually in June at that elite camp, worked out alongside each other. Seems like they built a decent bond with one another. And Danzy, being someone from the area and also wanting to play track at the next level, Florida State's offered him that opportunity. His only official visit was that short drive over to FSU's campus in June. So I think you've really got to see Florida State as the favorite going into this announcement. He is going to take visits to Miami and Florida during the fall, but I think the Seminoles probably going to get a commitment from him on July 15th. As for Hampton, his teammate at Florida High, I think right now he's probably going to be going to Clemson. He took some official visits to the Tigers, also Florida, Arkansas, and Louisville during the month of June. Not going to be taking his official to FSU until December, though. So, I mean, even if he does go off the board to Clemson, say that everything, he follows through with that official visit to Florida State in December, they're going to have an opportunity to flip him leading up to the early signing period. And I really see that as maybe kind of a strategy move for Florida State, because you're looking at the class now. You've already got CJ Hurd committed at the safety spot. You were able to add Rydarius Morgan over the weekend. Now you're going to swing for maybe some bigger fish a little bit. And if Florida State misses out on one of those guys or maybe loses someone out of the boat during the season, they can kind of revisit Hampton, who's right down the road and going to be taking that official visit in December, and maybe flip him late if needed.
Man, oh man, this could be a really, really fun July. I mean, definitely at the very end, but still a lot of targets to keep an eye on. I like that kid Danzy, man. That kid's fast.
Yeah, I think we mentioned on the show last weekend, second fastest in the world for the under 18 200 meter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking about world-changing speed coming to Tallahassee with that one. Reminds me a lot of Lawrence Toafili, I mean, can fit into that offense in a multitude of ways. Does exactly what Mike Norvell and Coach Yak are looking for in a running back, as someone that can be versatile and kind of, like I said, he fits that role opposite of what Cam Davis can do.
You know what, too, and, got to give credit to for Luke Kromenhoek, Florida State's blue chip quarterback, Bell Cal, also with Cam Davis, those two doing a really good job on the recruiting trail, helping Florida State's staff. But, Luke and what he was able to do with Elite 11 and now being a top 3 quarterback per the 247 Sports rankings, having him be at that level and the talent, I think a lot of players like him and across the country, like we talked about with Elijah Moore coming to Florida State. Whenever you have a quarterback like this, of this caliber, man, you're going to raise the bar on the kind of talent you're going to bring to your program. And it just seems like, at least on the offensive side, it's just a revolving door at the moment. It really is. And it's just crazy to think Luke only played just 1 year of varsity football, that he'll be going into his second year this upcoming fall. It's just wild to me, just the eval that Florida State was able to do with him, and Coach Tokar, shout out to him as well. But just wanted to give mention that, because, that's where Florida State is right now. And that's having a really good quarterback in your class. It's going to make things a little bit easier for you.
By all accounts, I mean, they absolutely nailed the evaluation, not only with what Luke's able to do on the field, but also with what he is off of it. And I mean, that has been stepping into a true leadership role for Florida State in this 2024 class. Everyone that Florida State's coaching staff is recruiting, Luke Kromenhoek is recruiting as well to try and get him in this class. Those two parties working together to kind of prioritize who FSU wants to sign in this recruiting cycle. And then on top of that, you've got Cam Davis, the longest standing commitment in the class. He's now a 4-star prospect, which I don't agree with. We're going to keep calling him a 5-star on this show. But guy who's been committed to Florida State for over 2 years, one of the biggest names in the Southeast in this recruiting cycle. His opinion carries a lot of weight as well, and he's been right there alongside Krollman Hawk and helping in a lot of these recruiting battles, even on campus last weekend for an unofficial visit just to come up during that final weekend of June to help Florida State kind of, end a couple of these recruitments. And it's paid off with 4 so far. We'll see if they're able to keep it rolling. But, I mean, just the way that class is so closely connected, very, very impressive group that Florida State has coming into Tallahassee in Tribe 24.
Well, make sure you guys are following Dustin on Twitter. It's in the description on the YouTube channel, and then also on the podcast platforms. It's all in the description, along with following our account at Noel Recruiting. Of course, at Noel Game Day, we're continuing to push out a whole ton of things. If you want to be covered on when commitments are happening, do you want to watch the commitments? We've got videos for that on the website. So, and then of course, when the commitments happen, we're getting you guys the news, really quick, right when it happens. So make sure you guys are following us on Twitter there, and definitely over there on our Facebook, because that just hit over 100,000 followers. So shout out to our Facebook crew over there. I think that's going to wrap up recruiting part of things. There's just a few quick hitters to finish off the show this evening, and that's one with a position change. Offensive player going to defense, and this is going to be Brian Courtney, Florida State's tight end. Going to be making a switch, at least starting into fall camp. We'll see how that goes, but he's going to go to the linebacker room. And, Dustin, I don't know if it was you and I that discussed it, or maybe it was just going through Discord, but Brian Courtney, a really athletic player, was able to show some nice hands to us during some practices and such, but I don't think this is much of really like a shocker to see Florida State maybe just testing the waters and see what his abilities are in the linebacker room. And I like it. I thought, Florida State, there would be some kind of move being made even in the transfer portal, or maybe a position change in-house internally. And so be it. Yeah, Brian Courtney's going to go give it a shot. I thought maybe Aaron Hester would maybe test the waters on that. Who knows? We might see that in fall camp. I think that he's just a little too undersized at the moment, off the side of the edge for FSU. We'll see if anything changes there. But first, Brian Courtney making a position change going into this fall camp. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
I feel like this was something that we always mentioned as a possibility, dating back to even when Brian Courtney committed to Florida State. This was someone that was recruited as an athlete, played quarterback at the high school level, but Florida State recruited him as a tight end due to, like you mentioned, his athleticism and how they projected him to develop as a wide receiver. But outside of his time at quarterback in high school, this was also someone that played some outside linebacker, and also I think played a little bit of safety as well, rushed off the edge a little bit. So, I mean, he's been kind of used around throughout his career as a football player. And I think this is just Florida State making a move where, you look at this upcoming 2023 season and the tight end room that Florida State has with Jaheim Bell, Kyle Morlock, Marquise Douglas, who really came on strong in the back half of that 2022 season, and Preston Daniel as well. And then behind that, Jackson West, we'll see if he's able to get back into the fold after missing last season with an injury. But it just doesn't look like there's a ton of snaps that Brian Courtney is going to be able to soak up this upcoming season. And now instead, you kind of flip him over to a room where, you're only going to be playing 2 players at this position, but if you're projecting out into further seasons, Brian Courtney, you're going to lose some guys in that linebacker room after this 2023 season. Kalen DeLoach, Tatum Bethune, who knows about DJ Lundy. But then after that, you're looking at an extremely young room with Omar Graham being your most experienced guy after those top 3. So adding Brian Courtney in kind of gives you a bridge between some of the true freshmen on the roster right now. And, just kind of creates some flexibility moving forward in the future. I think it'll help Courtney out as well, because this is a guy who played on multiple, if not all 4 of the special teams units for Florida State last season. And now he'll get to, be able to tackle more during practices. It'll be more natural, things like that, chasing down ball carriers. I think that'll only help him in his development. And moving forward, we'll see how the roster progresses, if guys transfer out and how things go. He could eventually end up going back to tight end. But I think this is just a move to put an athlete in a position to really I mean, quote unquote, make a play. And we'll see if this move to defense is going to benefit Brian Courtney or if he ends back up on the offensive side of the football.
I mean, it's important to note that on the roster officially, he's listed as both a linebacker and tight end, so he could end up playing both at some point this season or in the following seasons. I think it was just one of those that when he first showed up to campus, tight end was such a huge need for Florida State. They didn't really have much proven production there. Now you bring in Jaheim Bell. Now you bring in Kyle Morlock. You lose Steven Dix Jr. out of the linebacker room. It's just one of those, let's put a guy where it's needed most. And there's some that believe his linebacker tape was better than any of his other tape coming out of high school anyway. So I think it makes a ton of sense. If it could get him on the field sooner, I don't see why not.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea just for depth, and I also like that it's a tight end going to a linebacker position. When you're watching tape, whenever you're facing, you're most likely going to that second level and going against linebackers as well. So he's got a really good idea, too, of what he's going to be going against whenever he goes against the running backs, going against his tight ends. He knows what it is like on an offense and definitely that tight end position. So I think it's a smart move. I'm interested to see how that develops when we get into fall camp. But Florida State now, I feel better about that linebacker room just depth wise. I know we kind of were not in like disagreement, but we were just on the same page earlier in the offseason of adding some extra depth there. And I just think just having some extra help make me sleep better at night, just in case one of those guys, one of your star linebackers goes down or two of them, man, you got to rely a lot on Omar Graham and some youngsters. So and also losing Brendan Gant as well to Colorado. Yep. So I like the move, and I'm just really interested to see how he develops. But like you were saying earlier, Dustin, it's just an athlete, and you're going to see if he can make some plays with it. He's really got some special abilities, and he's a guy that is all gas 100% in practices. So, he's got good size and good athleticism and go east to west quickly, and that's what Florida State needs, like kind of like Kalen DeLoach, who, we saw last year be able to really improve and continue to get better and was one of the best players last year with what he was able to do with his talents and his legs, quick, getting over to the boundary. That's something I think Brian can utilize with that skill set he has. So we'll see. I'm interested.
I think you're really just adding insurance here, like you said, just in case someone goes down. You've got a guy like Courtney who's already been in the system a little bit to kind of step in. And he's actually, at least according to the online roster, already the basically third biggest linebacker in that room. So someone that already has the size to step into the position if necessary. But at the same time, Florida State, they've got to feel really confident in that top three that they have. Omar Graham had a pretty impressive spring. So this is just insurance. And I think Florida State, with the way that this coaching staff has been able to develop players over the last couple of years, just projecting guys out year by year. Someone like Brian Courtney just can really play anywhere in this system, and we'll see how it goes moving forward for him. But just the athletic traits that he has, I think that's stuff that you can't really coach, and we'll see if it fits better at linebacker than it did in a crowded tight end room.
Before we jump into Jayden Daniels talk, whenever he's talking about Florida State, I'll jump through this little question here from our guy Poochie Cuz 904 on YouTube asking, after Jordan Travis is gone this season, who y'all have for the 2024 season opener, which is going to be across the seas actually. But yeah, Florida State losing Jordan Travis to this upcoming year's draft. And then also, Florida State figuring out with Tate Rodemaker, AJ Duffy, Brock Glenn, and now Luke Kromenhoek. And it's going to be a wild offseason to cover, but just really early. We're already reaching ahead to the next season here, ladies and gentlemen. But you know what? We are in July, so why not? But who y'all feeling? Who you got? I think I've got an interesting take. I've got an interesting one. But
so do I. I feel like it's gonna be someone not on the roster. I feel like it's gonna be a transfer, which might be different, but it's one of those that I don't know if they're going to trust Rodemaker with the full season. He showed great flashes in the Louisville game last year, but are they going to trust him with the whole season? Is AJ Duffy going to be ready? We haven't seen anything yet to suggest he will. And, at that point, Kromenhoek will be going to his first season. You can't buy him as a starter. So I'm going to say it's someone that's not on the team currently.
I could see it. I just think it's going to be tough for Florida State to bring in a transfer. It would just kind of, potentially upset the dynamic that they have right now with three guys in 3 years, AJ Duffy, Brock Glenn, and Luke Kromenhoek, who would be on the roster at that time. Do you bring in someone and, depending on how many years of eligibility they have, risk someone transferring out? I'm not sure, especially, we'll see what happens with Tate following next spring. He could always elect to maybe grad transfer for his final season of eligibility elsewhere, depending on how things go. It's really hard to project when we're more than a year out at this point in time. But, just from what I've seen so far, it's hard to bet against a guy like Brock Glenn, who's really come in and been extremely impressive for Florida State during his first spring, has all the knacks, the intangibles that you want out of a quarterback that's going to fit into FSU's offense. We'll see how it goes throughout the fall. I'm sure Mike Norvell, Tony Tokars are going to have a really close eye on this one. Obviously, Jayden Travis going to get the QB1 reps, but seeing what Rodemaker is able to do, and also the continued development from Duffy and Brock Glenn, that's going to be a very underrated and crucial aspect of Florida State season, because you're not going to see it a lot on the field. It's going to be something that's happening behind the scenes on these practice fields week by week rather than on Saturdays. But that's going to eventually be paramount to what happens to Florida State's trajectory in 2020-24. So, we're going to see how it plays out.
Yeah. It's a fun discussion to have. It's far.
I'm leaning with Brock Glenn at this time. I think he's going to figure it out over the next year and change, and learning behind Jayden Travis, just seeing the mentality that kid has. And, we'll see if he's able to gain those reins as Florida State's starting quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's, just going through practices and seeing what we've seen from the last 2 years. I think right now, Rodemaker definitely has the system down with the offense, but it's really about trust. Could you go through a whole season with him in that way? But what he was able to do with Louisville was great. That was a big growth spurt for him. Mm-hmm. And added on, I think, a lot of motivation, but a little bit of courage for him to continue to get better and, take chances when need be. But I think going from last year and AJ Duffy, I was expecting to see a bigger jump from this last spring, and I didn't see that. There was, some better maturity traits that I was seeing from him, and a little bit more focus, I would say, and maybe protecting the ball better. But I also wanted him to take more risks, and I haven't really seen that, Dustin. We were watching the practices and stuff, and it's a lot of tuck and run where, there'd be potential for some guys to be open. And with Tate, he's going to give it a shot to his wide receivers. And Brock Glenn, I think, if we're going off of the first years of a quarterback, Brock Glenn does look, better than what AJ Duffy looked in his first year. But, we just got to see things develop, and a lot of things can change going into your second year. And, Glenn going through this offense, and Mike Norvell and Coach Atkins, and what they like to do. And we got to also think too, Florida State's going to be very stacked once again, heavily. Might be one of the most stacked in that running back room yet under Mike Norvell, with Cam Davis coming in. If you're able to have Danzy, what you've got, already in the room, some young talent like Rodney Hill. So you will rely a lot on your running backs. So maybe you won't be so stressed on your quarterback to do certain things. And it's definitely not the playmaking ability of Jayden Travis that he has with his legs. Florida State doesn't have that quarterback on the roster that has that ability. So I think there's going to be a lot of, utilization on that running back room, tight ends. You're stacked there now with some talent. But I think it'll be Tate starting off a little bit. And if things don't go that well, then it's going to be between either Luke or it's going to be Glenn. That's kind of where I'm at the moment, just off of some evaluations of seeing these guys practice.
And I'll be honest, I don't think that's the worst outcome for Florida State. I think Tate Rodemaker, at that point, he'd be in his final season of eligibility, 5th or 6th year at Florida State in this system. And we're able to see what he was able to do stepping in for Jayden Travis, kind of breaking that glass ceiling that it felt like was holding him back a little bit. I think Tate Rodemaker could be a bridge quarterback if you're talking about a one-season run in 2024 as Brock Glenn, AJ Duffy, and Luke Kromenhoek continue to get that seasoning a little bit, and one of those guys takes over in 2025. I don't think it would be the worst outcome for Florida State, but I think it would be better if a guy like Brock Glenn or a guy like AJ Duffy was able to expedite his development a little bit and grow into something where Florida State's coaching staff is more comfortable putting out a third-year AJ Duffy or a second-year Brock Glenn over a 5th or 6th year Tate Rodemaker. That would be a better outcome for Florida State.
Yeah. It's going to be fun. Well, at least let's just get through this season first, and then we'll get into the quarterback extravaganza, which will be fun. You're talking like a quarterback competition between it really will be a minimum of three players. I mean, you're definitely throwing Luke Hawk in there just because of the abilities and talent that he brings, and I can't wait to watch him in his second year of being varsity quarterback. It's going to be a lot of guys getting first team reps, and whoever does the best with it and is able to run through smoothly on the offense doesn't. But I think Tate easily does have that lead, but will he keep that throughout the whole entire season? That's my question mark. So we'll see what ends up happening, but good question there from our guy Poochie. I hope I'm not saying a bad word there. Poochie just sounds it just sounds interesting. I hope I'm not saying something crazy here on YouTube. Let's talk Jayden Daniels real quick, and then we're going to go over some Baba Miller getting the gold medal for Team Spain. Jayden Daniels had an interview recently, just like Jordan Travis and Trey Benson did, but he did one for LSU and talked ahead of
– it was at the Manning Passing Academy.
The Manning Passing Academy. As I just saw that here on my friggin'
Great
notes.
research.
Hey, I got it down in here. I just thought that he was talking with the LSU media. But, Jayden Daniels talking Florida State before the season opener. It's going to be a primetime matchup, Labor Day weekend. This is what he had to say. He said, "We earmark it because it's the first one. I mean, we all know what happened last year. We want that taste out of our mouth. We're going to go up against a great opponent in Florida State that hit the high note at the end of the season, so we know it's going to be a dogfight. But I mean, it's the first one. It should be a top 10 matchup, so all eyes are going to be on us. Just go out there and really just locking in, just go out there and executing." He continued to talk about the matchup and how big it is going to be for LSU and what they want to do for the aspirations of reaching the playoffs. He said, "It's very critical. We're going to play tough games down the stretch. We win that game one. Last year, we lost game one, and we had aspirations of going to the playoffs, so it's kind of hard. You play a lot of close games. Once you lose that second game, it's kind of hard to get back into the contention and the playoff spot at the end of the year. Winning game one is always very critical, especially for things we want to accomplish." And, I think a lot of similarities here. Florida State would agree. A lot of their players would in this state that winning this game really pushes you way ahead. I mean, that puts you in a playoff. I mean, just ranking wise, obviously that doesn't happen until later on in the season, but that puts you as a top 5, top 4, potentially top 3 team after this, because it is a really strong top 10 match at the beginning of the season. But any thoughts on what Jayden Daniels had to say, as we're now crazy to think 2 months away from kickoff, if I have that correctly?
He didn't say anything crazy. I mean, nothing that you wouldn't expect. This isn't really, like bulletin board material or anything like that. This is what you would expect a fellow competitor to say, especially, when you're talking about one that's going to be ranked one of the highest ranked teams in the country. Jayden Daniels, obviously the star quarterback of that team, and they're going against the opponent that they lost to by 1 point last season, who's also going to be extremely highly ranked. If anything, I thought it was respectful for Daniels, kind of to give Florida State some credit there. LSU did the same thing, started really hitting a new gear there late in the year, absolutely blew out their opponent in the bowl game. Both these teams going back to Camping World Stadium for this rematch, and it's going to be a very closely contested game. I think you're going to see kind of the same mindset on Florida State's side. Game one means everything. Like you said, Logan, you win this game, and even if you lose one for the rest of the season, you lose only one game the rest of the season, but you win this game, you're probably going to make the playoff. I mean, odds are. So this was a huge one for both sides, because if Florida State wins this one and, say they drop one to Clemson or someone else later in the year, but still went out, they're going to the playoff. And same thing for LSU if they're able to pull it off. So we'll see how it goes. But, I mean, this is going to be potentially the non-conference game of the entire 2023 season, and it should be a heck of a game to watch in Orlando with the talent on both sides and kind of the storylines that have also been created over the last year.
I thought it was very similar to what Trey Benson said in his interview recently, just about 2 top 10 teams, and they're looking forward to the matchup, staying focused. It's a game that like Dustin said, everyone's looking forward to, everyone's excited for, and whoever wins is going to have a major advantage going the rest of the season. So, just to expand on those comments, I thought it was respectful and what should be expected of a starting quarterback, for especially a guy that's been a starter for 3-4 years now, going back to his time at Arizona State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's definitely easy to like, and that's how quarterbacks should be speaking as well. But yeah, Florida State got the best of LSU last year, and now Florida State gets to have this game closer to home. We'll be in Orlando again. They'd already played along LSU too during their bowl season this last year, but still, Florida State being closer to home, they've already gone through that system of going over there and traveling. Mike Norvell talked about it last year before they played Oklahoma. It felt like this is a good chance to kind of get a good feel for how the next season is going to begin in 2023. So here we are now. We're getting close. It's crazy, 2 months away. We can literally say next month there will be college football games being played. Everybody right now, at least on the FSU side, it's been a while. I know there was definitely some excitement last year, yes, but I don't think a lot of people knew that the improvement that Jordan Travis was going to make, and it was phenomenal. Being one of the top quarterbacks in college football last year, and Tony Tokar is going into his first season coaching. Kenny Dillingham gone, and now at Arizona State. There was a lot. There was some question marks there. Now there's certified things that have been done. It's been delivered, and now it's time to go out there and show it to the rest of the country. And I'm stoked. I'm ready for it. I'm enjoying the off season, but it gets to the point now, like, we'll have Bucks training camp here in a few weeks, and once you just start smelling that grass early in the morning, fresh cut grass, you're like, oh, football season has arrived, and I'm stupid excited. Just need to get that rain and thunderstorms away from Tallahassee. Dustin, can you work on that for us? Y'all might be in the IPF a lot.
Turn that magnet back on. I don't know.
Something ain't right, man. Y'all are getting derailed up
hasn't
there.
Hasn't been bad the last 2 weeks, but it's coming.
Yeah. That's gonna finish off some football stuff. Let's finish off though the podcast with Baba Miller, VZ. Man, having a great. We talked about it last week though, but now officially earning a gold medal for Team Spain in U19. Man, what was his performance like? I feel like we were hearing some great interviews from him afterward.
He was good, man. We talked about it last week, like you mentioned, just how much more fluid, how much more comfortable he was looking on a basketball court after his first college season. Really didn't go like anyone expected, but he really performed well in this tournament. Especially in that championship game, those final 5 or so minutes in regulation to get Spain back in the game, force overtime, 9 points, couple rebounds, assists, a steal. He was all over the place in those final 5 minutes in the championship. It's exactly what you want out of Baba Miller. It's those 5 minutes where scouts are going, if he can expand on this 5 minutes for a whole game, he's a special talent at his size at 6'11", 7 feet. But just overall had a great tournament. Averaged, almost 10 points and 6 boards, a couple of assists. His peak was those games you mentioned last week against Lebanon, who, Team Spain absolutely destroyed. I think the final score was 102-20 or something ridiculous like that. Spain's just a different animal when it comes to these basketball tournaments, especially in FIBA. But he was great. I'm really excited to see what he can bring back to Tallahassee and what he's learned in this competition, and see if he could spread it around in ACC level competition. I'm really excited to see how he performs, but great overall showing from Baba Miller.
It's a thing, getting him to get clicking once he gets here to Tallahassee as well. That'll be good. I mean, he could be a big time. He could be a leader for this team this next season.
It's experience like this that just it expands so much. You see it a lot in the NBA where the guys that play for Team USA for the Olympics or FIBA or whatever, they come back and have such a jump their next season. We've seen it a lot. It wouldn't be surprising at all to see Baba Miller do that this coming season for Florida State. We saw him shoot the ball this tournament much better than he shot at Florida State last season. I tweeted one clip of him doing that behind the back crossover step back corner three. That's not something he was doing last year. And no, he looks so much more comfortable on the floor, and I'm hoping that stays for this upcoming season.
Be huge. Looks like he's in great shape at the moment, really playing with some confidence, which I think, Austin, I mean, maybe you can touch on it, but it seemed like maybe that was something that began to affect him a little bit once he came back and had some struggles at times, maybe was a little bit more timid than you would expect. But I mean, got his confidence back, had some really great moments for Team Spain in that run to gold. To see what he did in those final minutes of the final was absolutely thrilling. And then, of course, right when overtime starts, he fouled out pretty early there, but they were able to pull it out with the gold medal. And you've got to think that experience on the national stage, playing against that type of competition,
international stage, really.
Yeah. I mean, it was in Hungary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, flying all over the world to play basketball is Baba Miller, from Spain to Tallahassee to Hungary. And we'll see if this tournament is going to help pay off in his continued development. But it was promising to see some of those skills that we talked about whenever he signed with Florida State come to life a little bit in this tournament, and, for him to show some signs of growth.
Yeah, just talked about his conditioning a little bit. He got to campus last year, was dealing with shin splints, so he couldn't really participate in a lot of the summer workouts and preseason workouts. Then, he plays the one preseason exhibition, then we find out he gets suspended for the first half of the season. So he's not playing in games. And you could talk about, well, why isn't he in shape if he's, still practicing and stuff like that? It's not the same. In college basketball, and really basketball in general, there's a difference in game speed and practice speed. There just is, and there's game conditioning and stuff like that, just like there is with football. Just getting in that flow of playing in games is so much different than practices. Then he plays 2 games, has tonsillitis, has to sit out again. It was just a mess of a season, and I'm hoping that this FIBA U19 tournament keeps him in shape, and he comes back to Tallahassee, stays in that consistent shape.
Hey, to finish off the podcast, I was hoping this would happen. We have Ohio State in our title. We got some Ohio State fans in here. So, Ron Dugans, the donk, ran over those little peanuts or whatever those are. That was great. That was good stuff there. That was good. Great way to finish it off. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for the rest of this podcast. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us. 70 likes on here, had close to 100 on YouTube. Facebook's kicking right now. We'll have to check out this new social platform that literally just launched while we were live. Threads. Have to see how that works. Going to have to play with that tonight and see if there's any way we can utilize that for the podcast. And also let us know too. Tweet us or in the Discord. I'm seeing a lot of podcasts now. They're putting their entire episode on Twitter. So now that we can post some lengthier stuff with being blue verified or whatever, we can put the whole entire podcast out on our Twitter at Hear the Spear. So let us know if that's something that you would like. But nonetheless, we're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. Also on the podcast side of things, we're on Google Play, Spotify, iTunes. Hit that subscribe button too if you're on one of those podcast platforms. Before you leave, hit the like button. I really do appreciate everyone hanging out this evening. We'll be live next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. See, I'm getting some smiley faces and some laughing emojis in here, so it was a kind of a good joke. But yeah, the donk, Florida State, Seminoles, wide receiver room, continuously adding some talent right now, and Ron Dugan's finding some success. And so I'm sure we'll have some more recruiting to talk about next week. But yeah, everybody have a great rest of y'all's week, and we'll talk to you guys on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Peace.
Mama told me not to sell word. 17.5, same color t-shirt. Mama told me not to sell word. 17.5, same color t-shirt. Mama told me not to sell word. 17.5, same color t-shirt. Mama told me not to sell word.